Hey everyone. So we are going to be reviewing one-step equations, fractions, and two-step equations with fractions. And in this lesson, as we go over these two sections, again, this is review, but when we get into the two-step part, there's going to be a worksheet that's going to encompass all of this. So even though it's one-step and two-step, it's going to have everything on it. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So when you're doing one-step equations, and again, this is just review, but I do want you to show your steps. So don't just do these in your head. I know you can, but I'm trying to teach you a method, and I know you can probably do this stuff in your head down here too. But when we get into multi-step equations, either next year or whenever you guys are going to learn that, there are going to definitely be times when you cannot do this stuff in your head, and you're going to want these steps to know how to do it. Okay, so what we did before, if you listened to the one-step equation notes, is we located our variable, okay? And from there, that just tells us what side of the equation to start on. So we're starting over here. That's one of my biggest common questions as students say, how come you don't take the 10 away first? Well, because my variable is over here. So we're going to start on this side. We're going to cover this up. Whatever this says, we're going to do the opposite of. So we're going to take 12 from both sides. So 12 minus 12 is just 0, but we don't have to write that. So we're going to bring down our m, and that's going to equal whatever this is when you subtract it out. So 10 minus 12 is going to be negative 2. Okay, watch your positives and negatives. And again, you can check this. So what you would do is you would take this value, whatever the m is, you're going to plug that back in. Okay, so you're going to plug your answer in for that original equation. And you're going to see, does this side equal 10? And in this case, you can definitely tell it does. So this is going to be 10 equals 10, check mark. Okay. I'm going to leave the checks up to you, but I definitely want to see that in your work for your homework or your class time work. Okay, so this is our variable. We're going to leave it alone. We're going to start over here. Okay, so whatever the other thing is, whatever it's telling you to do, take 9 away, you're going to add 9. So this is going to be 0. You're going to be left with g equals, now you can either say negative 2 plus 9, or you can say 9 minus 2. That's going to be 7. Okay, so these right here are your answers. And again, I cannot emphasize enough, I know you can do this in your head, but that's not what I'm trying to teach you. Okay, so in reviewing, this was when we added and we subtracted both. We're adding 12 to this equation, so we subtracted. Here, they're subtracting something, so we're adding, okay? Over here, we're going to deal with the division part. So this right here, they're saying take negative 7, multiply it times y. There's our variable. We're going to divide both sides by whatever's in front of y, okay? So this is going to cancel, and that's going to leave you with y equals. Now, when you do this out, a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and 91 divided by 7 is 13. I believe that's 13. What is this? Yeah. Okay. Now, over here, this is our last one. So this was addition. Okay, that's when this other thing right here is adding. Right here we located our variable. This was subtracting. And this right here, it's saying take 7 and multiply it. So we're doing the inverse of that, and we're going to divide it. Okay, because they're telling us to take 7, negative 7, multiply it. This right here, they're saying divide, because a divided by 9. So you can see how we are doing each of the 4 functions: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So you have an example for each one of these on here. In my one-step equation notes, that if you had done that before, you would have known that we can set this equal to 1. I mean, put this over 1, I'm sorry. And when we do that, we take these opposite numbers and we set them equal to each other. We're going to cross multiply. So this is one of those where I love, because you're going to cross multiply. And you can always do this when you have two fractions, that equal each other. Okay, so you can always do this. And you might say, hey, wait a minute, there's not two fractions. This was -4. Well, I made it into a fraction by putting it over 1. Okay, so I'm going to switch out to a pencil, and then I'm going to take the product of these opposite things. You probably remember this because it's kind of like that butterfly thing, where a times 1 equals 9 times -4. And I'm going to put that in parentheses. Okay, so when you do this, this is just going to be a equals -36. Okay, and you can always do that feature whenever you have two fractions equaling each other. I love that. Okay, so we're going to come down here, and this is also a one-step equation, but I wanted to point out to you because this is, you can do these in two different ways. So you may have learned how to do this by putting a parenthesis around, taking the inverse of this and multiplying it to the entire equation. Okay, so that means you're going to multiply this times this and this times this. Okay, if you were to do that, this is going to, if you're going to multiply these two things first, hopefully you can see that this is going to be 6 over 6, which is just 1, and you're going to be left with x because they're going to, this is going to cancel each other. When you multiply this to this over here, this is saying 3 over 2 times 10. You can put that over 1. This is going to be 30 over 2, which is equal to 15. So this 3 over 2 times 10 is equal to 15. Okay, so you may remember that, you know, you can do that, and there's this 2/3 in front of your x value, and you just flip this upside down and multiply the whole thing. Okay, so let's do another one like that. Okay, so if you have, let's do this one, okay, because this one was positive and this one's negative. So let's say you're going to flip this thing upside down and move it, and multiply it. So let's say we multiply the entire thing by 5 over 6. Okay, so -5 times -6 is positive 30. And this right here is going to be over 30. Okay, so you can see that these two things are really going to just equal 1, 30 over 30. Okay, so I'm not even going to write that down. This and this multiplied will just give you k. Then you take this one and you multiply it to the 12. Okay, so if I do that, I'm going to use a dot right there. Hopefully you can see that I can cancel. So this is going to be what I can put into 6 is a 6. That's going to give me 1. And I can put a 6 into 12 2 times. And this right here, when I do that, is going to be -10. Okay, I don't know if you can see that or not. So my k equals -10. So that's kind of a long way to do it, okay? And that might be how you were taught. So I'm going to show you how I do it. And you're doing the same thing, but really you're just skipping a couple of steps. So what I do is if there is a number, like a fraction, in front of my variable, okay, all I do is I flip this thing upside down, like we did over here. We flipped it. But I'm just going to move it to the other side and multiply it. Okay? And then what happens is when I flip this upside down, what I'm really doing is I'm multiplying it over here and over here. I just don't put my brackets and multiply it here and here. I just flip it and move it. Okay? So what happens is this thing right here just cancels off. So you're left with W equals. Now, remember, when you multiply this, you can either multiply straight across and then reduce it, or I like to cancel. So 4 goes into 4 one time, 4 goes into -8, -2 times. Now I can multiply it. So -2 times 9 is -18. So this right here is going to be negative 18. And again, you can check that. Okay, so using that same method on this next one, because this is negative, I can take this, flip it upside down. It only works when it's in front of this variable. Okay, so right now we have fractions that are in front of these variables right here. So if I do that and I move it to the other side, this is going to be times negative 2 over 1. Now, when I do this, this cancels, leaving me with m equals, now negative 9 times negative 2 is positive 18. Okay, so again, these are when you have coefficients, or these numbers right here, these fractions, in front of your variable. And this works every time. So you can either do it where you flip this thing and multiply it to this and this, like we did here and here, or you could just do what I do and just flip it, move it, multiply it. Either method works. Okay, so now this part right here was review. Let's go ahead and start two-step equations. Okay, so these two-step equations are going to encompass all what we've been doing up here. So down here, just like we started before with our one-step equations, one-step equations just means that we just don't have anything in front of the x. Okay, these up here, you can notice they don't have anything in front of the m. There's nothing there. There's nothing in front of the g. Okay, when there's something in front of the variable, we do two steps. Okay, so we add or subtract, and then we multiply or divide. So just like before, we locate our variable. Okay, then you leave it alone. Whatever, that's just telling you what side we're going to start on. So whatever this is, if that's a positive, we're going to subtract. Okay, so this is going to be 42. This is going to cancel, and you're left with 6x. Now, just like up here, what we did, it was right here, this example right here. So when we have something that's in front of the x, again, I know you can do this in your head, but I want to see that you actually write this step down. So this cancels, leaving you with x equals 7. Okay, so right here, where's our variable? Right there. So this, you leave it alone, and that negative sign right there, you leave it alone, and you come over here to this. Okay, so that cancels. You've got negative 4x equals 13 minus 9, and that equals 4. So now we need to get rid of that negative 4. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide it off. So that cancels out, leaving you with x equals, and I'm going to just flip it backwards. So instead of it being on the right side of the equation, I'm actually going to write it first. So that x equals negative 1. Okay, so now we've got this fraction right here. So this fraction, x over 2 minus 7 equals 9. This is my variable. Okay, I don't care what's attached to it. You've got to leave it alone. So put your x or your finger over it if you need to. Then this is what you're going to do first. So you're going to take 7 and add it to both sides. Just copy everything else down. So x over 2, this cancels, equals 9 plus 7 is 16. Okay, so now this looks like one of these problems where you have a variable over a variable equaling something. So now we can just put this over 1 and we can cross multiply. So those two products have to equal each other when you multiply them. So x times 1 is x. 2 times 16 is 32. What does this mean? It means that x has to be 32 in order to solve this equation. If I put x right there and divide it by 2, 32 divided by 2 is 16. 16 minus 7 does equal 9. Okay, last one. Okay, so this is my variable. Now, notice my variable was over a number. This time, my variable is in front of this number. So remember, we can flip it upside down and move it, or we can multiply it to both sides. But first, we have to get our variable. this right here is our variable, that x, which means we have to leave everything that's attached to it alone, okay? So we leave it alone, we come over here and we do this first. This is going to be 6, this cancels, and now I've got 3/5 times x equals 6. Well, now this problem becomes a lot like what we were doing right here. Okay, so you can do it in one of two ways. It doesn't make any difference. You can either make the brackets, flip it upside down, multiply it to the entire equation, or you can do the same thing and just skip a step, flip it upside down, and multiply it to the other side. Okay, when you do that, x equals, now this is going to cancel because remember this is over 1. 3 goes into 3 one time, 3 goes into 6 2 times. So 2 times 5 equals 10. So what I want you to do right now, before we even get started on a worksheet, is I want you to do these 4. I want you to check them off to the side. Now you're going to be limited on space, but I want you to check them. And when you're done, let me come over and see it, and then I'll give you your homework or your classwork. Alrighty, we will talk to you soon. Good luck. Bye-bye.